Hello everybody, this is the last part of the digestive system. In this lecture I will talk about the stomach first, then I will talk about the gastric gland. In the wall of the stomach you have the gastric gland. We will talk about the small intestine, parts of the small intestine, its function. Then we will talk about the regulation of gastric secretion and motility or contraction or movement. Then we'll talk about the phases of gastric secretion. There are three phases of gastric secretion. We'll see what are those three phases. Then we'll talk about the large intestine, parts of it and functions. Then we'll talk about the accessory digestive organs. The accessory digestive organs include the salivary glands, liver, pancreas, gallbladder. So we'll talk about those structures. First, if you see a stomach, you know that esophagus is a long, narrow, flat tube that brings the food bolus into the stomach, right? And stomach stores the food for hours as well as digest the food, because a lot of secretion occurs from the gastric glands. So after the food bolus, which is a semi-solid structure, enters into the stomach, a lot of secretion occurs from the wall, okay, and that makes this semi-solid fluid food into liquid, like thick liquid, that is called the chyme, right? And if you see the stomach, it has four different parts. The area or part where this esophagus enters, this part is called the cardia, okay, and this dome shaped part is called the fundus, and this wide middle portion, that's the main part, is called the stomach body. And then this is the last part, the body gets narrow and forms this part. This is called the pyloric part or pylorus, okay, and the pyloric part or pylorus has two parts. You see here, this is the last part which is narrow. This is called the pyloric canal, and this first part is called the antrum, pyloric antrum. So pylorus has two parts. One is the antrum, which is the first wider part, and the last part is narrower, and it is called the canal, okay. So antrum and canal are two parts of the pylorus. So those are the parts of the stomach, and stomach has two curvatures or borders. You see, this is one, this one. This is called lesser curvature because this is small, and this big one is called the greater curvature. So this is the greater curvature, okay, and this one is the lesser curvature. Now if I see the wall of the stomach, if I just take a chunk out from the wall and see, I'll see four layers in it, okay. So from inside to outside, how many layers? Four layers everywhere in your GI tract. So innermost, this is the innermost layer. this is called the mucosa. Okay, and this is, so your lumen, that means inside the stomach, is here inside, and this is the outside of the stomach. So your food stuff is here, right, inside the stomach. So mucosa, and then this is submucosa. Then muscular is externa, and then outermost is the serosa. Okay, now if you see the mucosa has three sublayers or three layers in it. Okay, from inside to outside we see three layers. This is the epithelium, this is the lamina propria, and this is called the muscular is mucosa. So epithelial layer, then next is the lamina propria, which is the connective tissue layer, and then muscular is mucosa. That means thin muscular layer in the mucosa. That's why it is called the muscular is mucosa. And this layer causes very weak contraction. This is the main thick muscular layer. Muscular is externa. This one gives strong, forceful contraction. Okay, so now I'll see what are the layers of the mucosa, those three layers. So let's see that. So here you see the mucosa, this is inside, this is outside. Okay, so you see the mucosa is this part, and it has three layers. You see the outer layer has many cells. This is the epithelium. Okay, and then lamina propria is the underlying connective tissue, this one, lamina propria. Okay, and then you see thin muscular layer here, red one, that's the muscular is mucosa. That means thin muscular layer in the mucosa. So those are three layers: epithelium, lamina propria, and muscular is mucosa. And then this is the submucosa. This is muscular is externa, thick muscular layer, and this is the serosa. Now muscular is externa, you see here, this whole thick layer is the muscular is externa. And in the muscular is externa of the stomach wall has three arrangement of the smooth muscle fibers. Okay, innermost smooth muscle fibers are oblique, then middle fibers are circular, and outermost fibers are longitudinal. So let me just tell you how those fibers are in the stomach. So this is the stomach, right? So if I see the wall, the longitudinal smooth muscle fibers are going like this, circular muscle fibers are going like this. Okay, and oblique fibers are going obliquely. Okay, so these three different arrangement of the fibers, muscle fibers, can contract the stomach in many different angles, many different ways, right? So that is very helpful to break the food, digestion of the food. Okay, now you see these cells in the epithelium, innermost layer of the mucosa, are very important because these cells form the gastric gland. So we'll see the gastric gland. So if I just take a small piece like here and see, you see these are the cells, right? These are the cells, and this entire part, that means this part, I have taken this only a slice from here to here, right? Just one block from here and showing here. So this outer part, you see here, this part is called gastric pit. Okay, gastric pits, and this inner portion here is called gastric glands. Okay, so now let's see these two structures here or parts here. Gastric pit is this part and gastric gland is the deeper part, right? And in the gastric pit you will see openings. So what happens from this part, gastric gland part, these cells, you see different types of cells shown by different colors. These cells secrete the chemicals here, right? And those chemicals will get out through the gastric pit and get mixed with the food stuff here. So this is inside the stomach. Okay, so food is here. So from the gastric gland, the secretion enters here and then gets out through the gastric pit into the lumen of the stomach. Okay, and if you see the epithelial cells in the gastric pit part, these cells, you see, these cells are called the mucus cells. Mucus cells secrete mucus, and that mucus is, clear, slippery secretion, thick secretion, and that secretion actually lines the inner surface of the stomach to protect the wall of the stomach, because the food stuff, the chyme here, is highly acidic. So inside the stomach is highly acidic, the food stuff. So that mucosa makes a protecting layer, so the acid will not get direct contact or touch to the stomach wall. So that is a good way to protect the stomach wall from the acid here. Okay, now if for some reason that mucosal barrier or protecting layer is destroyed, then the acidic chyme will get contact to the wall and will cause erosion or inflammation, and even can cause ulcer, right? Gastric ulcer or peptic ulcer. So breaching of the mucosal barrier can cause gastritis initially, which is the redness in the wall, and then can lead to gastric or peptic ulcer. Okay, so mucus cells are very important, right? Secrete mucus, and that gives protection. In the gastric gland part, you will see different types of cells, you see shown by different colors. What are different types of cells in the gastric gland part? The main cells here are parietal cells, G cells, chief cells. Okay, the parietal cells secrete hydrochloric acid in adults. In the chief cells secrete pepsinogen, okay, which is an inactive form of pepsin, and when hydrochloric acid works on it, it is converted to pepsin. Okay, and the G cells secrete gastrin. G cells secrete a hormone that is called gastrin. So these are the main cells in the gastric gland. So now we'll see. You see, the gastric gland has parietal cells, chief cells, also called zymogenic cells, and gastric neck cells, enteroendocrine cells. Okay, these are the cells, important cells. These are mucus cells that I showed you mucus cells, and G cells. Okay, now as I already mentioned, parietal cells secrete hydrochloric acid, right, and activates pepsinogen to convert inactive pepsinogen to active pepsin that I showed you before. Okay, and this hydrochloric acid keeps stomach content at very low pH. You remember I said inside the stomach the chyme is highly acidic, right? So the pH is very low. Acidic means pH is very low. Below 7 is acidic, right? So inside the stomach the content is highly acidic. G cells, enteroendocrine cells, produce variety of hormones, and chief cells produce pepsinogen, and HCl converts it to active pepsin. In infants, the chief cells also produce renin and gastric lipase, and these two chemicals help to digest the mother's milk or the milk that the infant gets from outside. So that's why in infants these two secretions are very important. Okay, so now how the hydrochloric acid is produced in the lumen. This is the lumen, that means the food stuff is here, right? Food stuff is here. This is inside the stomach, and this is the parietal cell, just one parietal cell, and this is in the wall of the stomach, right? So this is the wall. So what happens in the wall, in the tissue, you have interstitial fluid, right? The cells and the fluid between the cells is called the interstitial fluid. So what happens, you see, the carbon dioxide reacts with the water inside the parietal cells. That means in the cytoplasm, right? Cytoplasm inside the cell. You have the cytoplasm. So in the cytoplasm of the parietal cell, carbon dioxide reacts with the water, and that produces carbonic acid. This is an acid, and then it will quickly split into bicarbonate and hydrogen. So you see hydrogen gets separated, right? And that hydrogen ion will enter into the lumen in the chyme by active transport. Okay, and the chloride that actually comes from the interstitial fluid. You see interstitial fluid, by counter transport, the chloride enters into the parietal cell and then gets out from the parietal cell this way, right? So now in the lumen, in the chyme, hydrogen ion is released as well as the chloride ion is released, and these two will get together to form the hydrochloric acid, which is an acid, right? Now why inside the lumen these two are secreted separately before HCl is produced? Because you know, if HCl is produced inside the cell, it will kill the cell, destroy the cell wall and kill the cell. So that's why they are produced separately and released into the lumen separately, and then they join together to form the hydrochloric acid in the chyme. So that is safe. Small intestine. Small intestine is very long. It's about 6 meter. Average overall length is 6 meter. That means nearly 20 feet. And if you see the parts, first shortest part is called the duodenum, and then middle part is jejunum, and last part is the ileum. I mentioned these parts before. So here you see this blue C-shaped part is the duodenum. So just after the stomach you have the duodenum. Then this part is the jejunum, and this longest part is the ileum. And then the ileum ends into the cecum, which is the first part of the large intestine, right? So this is the cecum here, the first part of the large intestine, and ileum enters here. Okay, there is a valve called ileocecal valve. Makes sense. Ileum and cecum. That's why ileocecal valve. Okay, so those are the parts of the small intestine. Now if you see inside the small intestine, so this is the small intestine. If I see inside, I'll see many circular folds are inside the small intestine. Roughly about 800 folds are present inside the small intestine, and these are circular folds called plica circularis. Okay, plica circular folds or plica circularis. Okay, and now if I just see one plica circularis, so this is the plica circularis, right? This is a fold, and on the surface I'll see many finger-like structures. These are called villi, intestinal villi, right? So like fingers. So this is plica circularis or circular folds, circular fold, just one, and these are what? Intestinal villi. And now if you see the surface of the villi, you will see many hair-like structures like brush border, and these hair-like structures are called microvilli. Okay, so circular fold, then villi, then microvilli. All these things together increase the surface area a lot and helps in absorption of nutrients, and most of the nutrients are absorbed, that means taken into the blood in the intestine through the intestinal wall. Okay, so here you can see the folds. You see the folds, you see the folds here, circular folds going like this. Okay, and now if you just take a small piece from here out and see under powerful microscope, you will see the villi, finger-like structures. And if you see again under more powerful microscope, just take this little bit portion from here and see, you will see this is a villus and many microvilli, right? So that's how the inner surface of the small intestine is. Okay, that's the brush border. And brush border contains enzymes that digest the materials. Okay, now if you take one villus and see inside each finger-like villus, you have a number of structures. You have the artery, capillary, vein. You see the green one is the lymphatic vessel. So the branches of the arterial, branches of the venule, and branches of the lymphatic vessels, they enter into the villus. Okay, and this lymphatic vessel inside the villus is called the lacteal. Okay, it absorbs fat molecules, and capillaries, blood capillaries absorb mainly proteins and carbohydrates, and lacteal, that lymphatic vessel, absorbs mainly the fat. Okay, so that's the villus. Inside the villus you have those vessels. Okay, now the hormonal regulation of digestive activities. Five major hormones regulate the digestive activities. You need to just remember the names. One I mentioned before, enteroendocrine cells in the stomach secrete gastrin, right? Um, these cells are also called G cells. And another hormone is secreted from the duodenum. That means from the first part of your small intestine. So gastrin is secreted mainly from the pyloric antrum part of the stomach, right? And also gastrin is secreted from the duodenum. So both from the stomach and duodenum, last part of the stomach and the duodenum. But secretin is secreted or released by the duodenum. When the chyme enters into the duodenum from the stomach, that stimulates the release of secretin. And gastric inhibitory polypeptide or peptide, GIP, gastric inhibitory peptide. This is another hormone, and it is also released from the duodenum, but when the fats and carbohydrates enter into the small intestine. Okay, so these hormones are released in the stomach and duodenum. This one from both the stomach and the duodenum, and this is from the duodenum, this is from the duodenum. And secretin is released when the chyme from the stomach enters into the stomach. And secretin actually increases the pH of the chyme. So this is alkaline secretin, and that increases the pH. That means the acidic, strong acidic chyme will become less acidic. Okay, so which is better. Another hormone that is called cholecystokinin. It is secreted from the duodenum too, and this cholecystokinin is mainly released when the fatty food enters into the duodenum and causes contraction of the gallbladder. So this cholecystokinin or CCK will enter into the blood. All hormones are secreted into the blood, and then blood will take it to the gallbladder, and it will cause, this hormone will cause contraction of the gallbladder. Okay, so the bile will be ejected from the gallbladder and will enter into the duodenum. Okay, and that is the cholecystokinin. It helps in the ejection of the bile. And the last one is vasoactive intestinal polypeptide or VIP. This is also released in the duodenum and stimulates secretion of the intestinal glands. So it will stimulate the intestinal glands to secrete the chemicals. So here this is the cartoon or picture. You see here very nicely shown all those hormones. So you see gastrin is secreted from the pyloric part of the stomach, last part of the stomach. Also it is secreted from the duodenum too. Okay, so gastrin. And gastrin stimulates the parietal cells and also stimulates the motility or movement of the stomach wall. GIP is released from the duodenum. Secretin also released from the duodenum, right? So all these are released from or by the duodenum. Gastrointestinal polypeptide or GIP, secretin, cholecystokinin or CCK, and vasoactive intestinal peptide or VIP. All these four are released from the duodenum, right? And their functions have been listed here that I also mentioned. Okay. Phases of gastric secretion. Gastric secretion means, gastric means stomach, right? So secretion inside the stomach here. Now in three phases secretion inside the stomach can occur. One is, you all know, when you, even before you put the food in your mouth, if you smell the food, if you see the food, delicious food, right, and you are hungry, secretion will occur from the wall of the stomach into the lumen. So that is called the cephalic phase. Cephalic means head. That means even if you are thinking about food, right, secretion can occur. Seeing food, smelling food, or tasting food. So before the food enters into the stomach, those can stimulate the secretion or release of the chemicals into the stomach wall, from the stomach wall. And that is the cephalic phase, like you are seeing the food or smelling the food or tasting the food in your mouth, secretion will occur into the stomach from the wall. So this is before the food enters. Then after the food arrives in your stomach, what happens, the pressure of food will stimulate the chemoreceptors. You know, two types of receptors are here in the wall. You have the mechanoreceptors and chemoreceptors. By the name you can tell which one will be activated by what receptors, right? Two types of receptors. Mechanoreceptors are stimulated by the pressure. So when you eat more, pressure is more on the wall, and that will activate the mechanoreceptors. And chemoreceptors will be activated by the chemical nature of the food. You know, the food could be protein, carbohydrates, fats, right? And that will stimulate different chemoreceptors. So both mechano and chemoreceptors are present in the wall of the stomach, and the presence of food will stimulate them or activate them, right? And that would, you remember, there are two nerve plexuses. One is called submucosal nerve plexus and another is called myenteric. We talked about this myenteric nerve plexuses, right? So when these receptors will be activated, they will stimulate these nerve plexuses, and these nerves will cause the contraction in the wall as well as secretion from the gastric gland. You know the gastric gland, right? All those cells, parietal cells, chief cells, right? Gastrin secreting cells would secrete the chemicals. So this is called the gastric phase of secretion. Makes sense? Because after the food arrives into the stomach. And then another phase is called intestinal phase. This one happens when the food stuff or chyme enters into the small intestine, that is the duodenum, first part of small intestine. That would secrete the hormones, and that hormones will go to the wall to stimulate the nerve plexuses, muscles and glands. Okay, so you see uh, the food, presence of food in the intestine would send a reflex to the wall, okay, and these hormones will enter into the blood and will go to the wall. So you see three phases of gastric secretion, and this intestinal phase is important. Just think that if stomach did not do a good job, that means foodstuffs are still not well digested. So what kind of signal should go to the stomach? That do better job, right? More secretion, more contraction. But if the intestine is happy that the digestion was done perfectly, very well, then it will send inhibitory signal to the stomach that you don't need to do more work. Makes sense, right? Okay, so these have been explained here. You see, I told you, if you see the food, smell the food, or taste the food, you see here, uh, even think the food, about the food, secretion will occur from the mucous cells, Giff cells, parietal cells, G cells, and that is the cephalic phase, right, before the food enters into the stomach. Then after the food enters into the stomach, the mechanoreceptors, also called the stretch receptors, makes sense, by pressure, and chemoreceptors would be activated, and through the submucosal and myenteric nerve plexuses will stimulate the smooth muscle and glands to cause the secretion and contraction. Makes sense? And then the intestinal phase, you see the food stuff enters into the duodenum or first part of the intestine, and that would secrete the hormones. Remember, these are the hormones: secretin, GIP, gastrointestinal polypeptide, cholecystokinin or CCK, and these hormones will be secreted into the blood. Okay, remember, into the blood. Hormones always released into the blood, and then the blood will take them to the wall and will stimulate the nerve plexuses to cause the contraction and the glands to cause the secretion into the stomach. Okay, now the large intestine. Large intestine is about 5 feet long, and the main function of the large intestine is absorption of water and vitamins and electrolytes. So water, vitamins, as well as electrolytes. Okay. Nutrients are mostly absorbed, like proteins, carbohydrate, fats, molecules are absorbed in the small intestine. However, water, vitamins are mainly absorbed in the large intestine. Okay. So when a lot of water is absorbed from the food stuff, the chyme will become harder, right, and form the stool. Absorption of water and vitamins, and the large intestine has three parts. First part is the cecum, I showed you before, where the ileum, the last part of the small intestine, ends, right? So this is the ileum, and this is the first part of the large intestine. This is the cecum, and this is the ileum, end of the ileum or small intestine, right? And there is a tiny worm-like structure or tiny finger-like structure attached to the cecum, that is called the appendix, vermiform appendix, right? Vermiform means worm-like appendix. Appendicitis is pretty common, because end arteries are present here, so no anastomosis in the artery, so the food stuff can stuck there and cause infection in the arteries, and that can cause rupture of the appendix, and once it is ruptured, then the toxic food stuff will enter into the peritoneal cavity, which is very large and is spread everywhere to cause harm to the other organs. So it is very dangerous once it is ruptured, right? That's why you need to remove it before it ruptures. Okay, so inflammation of the appendix is appendicitis. Anyway, so this part is the cecum. That's the first part of the large intestine. Then you have the ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, and S-shaped part is called the sigmoid colon, this part, and then rectum, anal canal, and anus. Okay, so cecum, then colon starts here and ends here. So what are the parts of the colon? Ascending, going upwards, transverse this way, descending colon, and this is sigmoid colon, right? So those are the parts of the colon. Then you have the rectum, then anal canal and anus. But anal canal and anus are not the parts of the large intestine. Large intestine ends here at the rectum. Okay, so you see here those parts. Anal canal. If you see, this is the rectum, and then the anal canal and the anus, right? In the anal canal, you have two sphincters. This is one, this is another. This is the inner sphincter or internal sphincter, and this is the outer or external. Okay, this is voluntary. That means you can control, open or relax or constrict it. This one is involuntary. We cannot control it. Your reflex from the spinal cord will relax it. Okay, so this is the spinal cord. If this is the spinal cord, what happens when you defecate? First you voluntarily relax the external sphincter, okay, and that signal goes to the spinal cord, and then spinal cord sends signal. This is not voluntary, right? This is autonomic. Will go to the internal sphincter to relax this one. So now this one is relaxed, so the fecal material will move down, and this one you voluntarily relaxed, so the feces will get out. Okay, now if you see the large intestine, so this is the cecum, appendix, end of ileum. This is the ileocecal valve here. Now you see ascending colon, this is the transverse colon, this is the descending colon, this is the sigmoid colon. Okay, now if you see the large intestine from outside, you'll see many pocket-like pouches. These are called haustra. These pocket-like pouches, and also you'll see bands of thick smooth muscle fibers. You see here attached to the large intestine, and these bands are called tinea coli. And also you will see teardrop-like fat structures. These yellow structures you see here. You see this one. So these fat structures are mainly attached to the tinea coli, and these are called epiploic appendices or omental appendices, fatty appendices. Okay, so those three things you will see from outside in the large intestine. Okay. Okay, now accessory digestive organs. The main accessory organs are salivary glands. There are three sets of salivary glands. Okay, here you can see parotid, just below the ear. This is the largest. You have other in the other side, and under the mandible, submandibular, under the tongue, sublingual. So these are three types of salivary glands. And salivary secretion is slightly acidic, so the pH is a little bit acidic, and that can keep the mouth clean regularly, and because the secretion of saliva occurs all the time, to cleanse the mouth and also to kill the bacteria. Gallbladder produces bile and eject the bile, or release the bile, and bile is very helpful for fat absorption and metabolism. So metabolism of fat and absorption of fat by the bile. Pancreas produces pancreatic juice, and pancreatic juice is very important because it has all kinds of digestive enzymes, amylase, lipase, protease. So it has all kinds of digestive enzymes. And liver is the organ that produces bile. Remember, liver produces and secrete bile, and gallbladder stores bile. So two different things, right? So liver produces and secrete biles, and that bile will enter into the gallbladder and will be stored there. And when it is stored there, water is absorbed. That means the bile will get concentrated, water will be taken out. So concentrating the bile. These are two important functions of the gallbladder: storing and concentrating the bile. And when requires, it will contract to eject the bile into the duodenum. And liver produces and secrete bile. Two different things. Okay. The different types of salivary glands. The functions of the saliva, you see parotid, sublingual under the tongue. This is sublingual. Submandibular under the mandible. And if you see carefully, ducts, these are exocrine glands. So ducts or tube-like structures take the bile to the oral cavity or mouth. So all these glands have ducts or tube-like structures attached to take the secretion and to the mouth. Salivary gland has two types of cells. Mucus cells secrete mucus, that sticky, slippery secretion helps to make the food bolus, right? And serous cells secrete watery secretion. It has antibodies and bactericidal chemicals, so will kill the bacteria as well as will keep the mouth clean. Okay, how much saliva is released per day? Salivary glands produce about 1 to 1.5 liter of saliva each day, and 99.4% of it is water. So saliva is highly watery secretion. These are the functions of the saliva. As I mentioned, antibodies are released. Lysozyme can kill the bacteria, and the cleansing of the mouth, or cleaning, keep the mouth or oral cavity clean. And the pH of saliva is slightly acidic, very little, so that would also destroy the bacteria, the slightly acidic secretion. Okay. The liver is the largest gland of the body. The weight of the liver is about 1.5 kilogram, and it has 4 lobes: right lobe, left lobe, caudate, and quadrate lobe. Right lobe is the largest one. That's why we say liver is mainly in the right side, because right side's lobe is the largest lobe. Left side's lobe is the left lobe, which is smaller than the right, and caudate and quadrate, these are much smaller. Okay. The ligaments, those are attached to the liver, are falciform ligament and round ligament. Okay, to tie the liver to the body wall. Other structures you will find, these are attached to the liver. The gallbladder is just located in the inferior surface of the liver. Common bile duct and porta hepatis is the area through which the blood vessels and bile ducts pass. Porta hepatis. So we'll see those structures. You see, this is the liver, right lobe, left lobe, right? And if you see the bottom, this is the quadrate lobe. Why quadrate? Because this is kind of rectangular, okay, next to the gallbladder. And this one is called the caudate lobe. It did not show the caudate lobe here. Oh, here. This is the caudate lobe. Okay, and this is the quadrate lobe. So the best way to know which one is caudate, which one is quadrate. Quadrate is rectangular and next to the gallbladder, right? And caudate is not rectangular, next to the inferior vena cava, the large vein next to it. Okay, and then you see the ligaments. This is the falciform ligament. Okay, and this is the gallbladder here. Now this area is called porta hepatis. You remember I said the indentation, or the area through which the blood vessels, hepatic artery, hepatic vein, then bile duct, as well as the portal vein, all those structures enter or pass through this area, porta hepatis. Okay. Now if you cut the liver and see inside, what you'll see inside the liver, there are many hexagonal lobules. So this is one lobule. Hexagonal means it has 6 angles. Okay, this is another lobule. So inside the liver you have the lobules, and this is another lobule. Okay, this is another lobule. And in each corner, you see, this is one lobule, and each corner of a lobule you have the areas where you will find an artery, a vein, and a branch of the bile duct. So this corner area is called portal triad or hepatic triad. Okay, so this is one triad, this is another triad. You will see triad, portal triad. Okay, where you have a branch of hepatic portal vein, hepatic artery, a branch of a bile duct, all those are in the triad. So here you have a triad, you have those structures, here you have a triad, in each corner you have a triad. Okay, now inside the lobule you will see a central vein. Here this is the central vein in the center, and then you will see the hepatocytes, very nicely organized. Hepatocytes are the liver cells, right, cytes, and the hepatocytes secrete bile. You remember I said bile is produced and secreted in the liver. So the hepatocytes will secrete bile, and the secreted bile through the bile canaliculi will enter into the bile duct in each portal triad. Okay, will collect that bile. That's why you have the bile ducts in each corner. Okay, so central vein, right, in the center here. Okay, now if you see here, these are bile canaliculi, these fine channels. Okay, and these are the hepatocytes, liver cells, and they will secrete the bile. Then bile will enter into the canaliculi. These green structures are canaliculi from each cell. You see, they are attached to each cell, every cell. So the cell will secrete the bile, will enter into the canaliculi, and from the canaliculi will enter into the bile ductules, and then from there we'll go to the branches of the bile duct. From ductule we'll go to the duct. So first is the canaliculi. So the hepatocytes or liver cells will release into the canaliculi, and canaliculi will give it the bile to the bile ductules, okay. Then bile ductules will give to the bile duct in each corner, that means in each triad ducts, okay. So that's how the bile will be collected and will be taken to the gallbladder, right? The path of the bile. After the bile is collected, then the bile will get out from the liver through these two large ducts. These are called the hepatic ducts. How many? Two. Right and left hepatic ducts. So this is right hepatic duct, this is left hepatic duct. Will take the bile out from the liver, and they will join just outside of the liver to form the common hepatic duct. Common. Remember, hepatic, not bile. Hepatic duct. This is the right hepatic duct, this is the left hepatic duct, and this is the common. And then this is the gallbladder. From the gallbladder a duct arises that is called the cystic duct, okay. And when the common hepatic and cystic will join together, they will form a long duct that is called the bile duct, also known as common bile duct. Bile. So now no more hepatic, it is called bile duct, okay. And it will enter into the duodenum. Remember, the first part of the small intestine will enter into the duodenum, okay. And here you have the pancreas, and from the pancreas the pancreatic duct will join just before it enters into the duodenum here. So this is the pancreatic duct, okay. Pancreatic duct will take the pancreatic juice. It has all kinds of enzymes, and bile will come this way, okay. And as I told you, that bile should be released more when you eat more fat rich food, because bile helps in fat metabolism and absorption. You see here, this is the pancreatic duct, this is the common bile duct, and this is the duodenum. So they will join just outside of the duodenum and will enter into the duodenum. Pancreas is a mixed gland. It has both exocrine and endocrine parts. Pancreas is a mixed type gland. Why? Because the pancreas, if you see, inside the pancreas you have both exocrine and endocrine cells. The exocrine parts are responsible for pancreatic juice production. So these are called, exocrine parts are called acini, pancreatic acini. And inside the acini you have the acinar cells, and these cells secrete the pancreatic juice. Okay, and that juice has, I mentioned before, amylase, lipase, protease, all kinds of digestive enzyme. So acini secrete juice, pancreatic juice. And remember, I showed you the pancreatic duct will take the pancreatic juice out from the pancreas and will deliver to the duodenum. Okay, this is the pancreatic duct. So from the acinar cells or acini, they will release the pancreatic juice into the duct. Okay, and duct will take it out to the duodenum. So this is the exocrine part of the pancreas. It is responsible for digestive juice secretion and helping digestion. Very important. The endocrine parts of pancreas are called pancreatic islets. So these are the endocrine parts, islets, also called islets of Langerhans. Okay, pancreatic islets. And islets don't do digestion. It has they release insulin and glucagon, these two hormones. This one lowers the blood sugar, you know, diabetic patient takes this, and glucagon does just opposite, increases the blood sugar. So the endocrine part, islets, is not responsible for digestion, responsible for sugar regulation in the blood. Okay, so those are the things you need to know from this part of your digestive system. Okay, thank you everybody.